We'll call the meeting to order for the Wicomico County Council Legislative Session 2018-20 for September 4th, 2018. Those that would like to stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, please do. Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda, entertain a motion to approve legislative minutes from August 21st, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the special legislative minutes from August 13th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion, corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from August 7th in reference to the enterprise fleet.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from August 7th, 2018 in reference to the cottage at Adkins Mill Park.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from August 7th, 2018 in reference to forest conservation easement.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from August 21st, 2018 in reference to the procedure regarding liens.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from August 21st, 2018 in reference to the fund balance policy.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from August 21st, 2018 in reference to the amendment to the capital improvement budget.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from August 21st, 2018 in reference to tourism and the Youth and Civic Center Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Good evening, Mrs. Hurley. How are you?
Good evening, Council President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. The first item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing on resolution number 98, 2018, to approve the relocation of a forest conservation easement containing 2.77 acres more or less located on tax map 41, parcel 173, lot 4A on Friendship Road in Pittsfield, Maryland. A public notice was posted on the county's website and published in the Daily Record, stating that a public hearing would be held this evening at 6 p.m. Council previously had a work session on this on August the 7th, and we do have Mr. Tyler Walston here with the Planning and Zoning Department.
Okay. At this time, we open the floor for public hearing on resolution number 98, 2018. If you have any comments that you'd like to make in reference to this resolution, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and your concerns. This concludes the public hearing on resolution number 98, 2018. Entertain a motion from council to approve resolution 98, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes, sir.
I would like to ask if we could have a work session pertaining to these forest relocations. It seems like this one got drug out for quite a while, and possibly if we could have a work session within the next couple meetings. so this wouldn't happen again.
We can set that up in 2 weeks if the particular department heads and the executive branch are in agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Holloway. Mrs. Hurley?
Next on the agenda is a public hearing on resolution number 99, 2018, to amend the fiscal years 2019-2023 capital improvement program and capital budget for the recreation, parks, and tourism, author W. Purdue Stadium Modernization Project, to increase the state of Maryland grant funding from $480,000 to $580,000. A public notice was posted on the county's website and published in the Daily Times stating that a public hearing would be held this evening at 6 p.m. And council had a work session on this request on August the 21st. And we do have Mr. Steve Miller here, Director of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism.
Thank you, Mrs. Hurley. At this time, we open the floor for a public hearing on Resolution 99, 2018. If you have any comments you'd like to make in reference to this resolution, please come to the podium, state your name, your county of residence, and your concerns. This concludes the public hearing on Resolution 99, 2018. Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution 99, 2018.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion?
The extra 100,000, that's coming from a state grant?
Any other questions? The answer was yes, by the way, from Mr. Miller. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 99, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
The next item for consideration is Resolution Number 100, 2018, authorizing the county executive to accept a grant award from the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore in the amount of $3,500 for the Fresh Start, a Wicomico County Back to School event. This resolution has been updated to show the fund number as Fund 60 rather than Fund 02.
Okay. Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution 100, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Resolution passes.
Okay, next is Resolution Number 101, 2018, authorizing the county executive to accept a grant award from the Donnie Williams Foundation in the amount of $5,000 for the Fresh Start, a Wicomico County Back to School event. And again, this resolution has been updated to show Fund 60 instead of Fund 02.
Okay. Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 101, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Resolution passes.
That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurley. Good evening, Mr. Roser.
Good evening, Mr. President.
We want to be out of here. We want to be out of here by 6:15.
Okay, we're on it, sir. I call your attention to Resolution 102, 2018, related to the latest purchase card audit.
Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution 102, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Roser.
With your permission, I'd like to turn it over to the Assistant Internal Auditor, Levin Hitchens. He has a quick overview for you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, Councilman. We performed an audit on the county purchasing card program. We sought to gain an understanding of the department level controls, analyze the card usage, and we evaluated the adherence to internal controls. The purchase card system had previously ended in 2016, but it had recently been reinstated in the past year or so. The protocols were nearly the same as they were before. Bank of America Works program is the program they use to monitor it, and our office does have access to that program to run reports periodically. The limits are typically for a normal user $1,000 per day or $5,000 per month. We performed extensive testing. Over a dozen of our tests came back satisfactory. We did have a few that we had concerns about, and we wanted to monitor going forward. Those were sales tax, where the county is not supposed to pay sales tax. And while we are doing manual reimbursements, we would like to see that put into works more efficiently. The card count, we have a lot of cards in the county that don't actually have activity. While that's not a problem, it doesn't cost us anything. It does technically open us up for more liability by having more active cards out there. Inactive employees, cards aren't being canceled immediately. Normally takes a few weeks. We would like to see the purchasing department work with HR and take care of that when the employees go in at the door. As well as open checkbook on the county's website. Currently, it's being reflected as Bank of America, opposed to the purchase cards showing the vendors that we're paying directly. Otherwise, we would like to thank the purchasing and finance departments for all their cooperation and ask you guys if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hitchens. Council questions?
I have a question. It's indirectly related to this, and as someone would say, it's a little bit off the rails. But you said there are a number of vehicles with no activity. Maybe we should do an audit on their vehicles and the activity of the vehicles? Would you suggest that?
Number of cards.
Number of cars.
Right.
Number of vehicles with no activity.
No.
Cards.
Cars. Oh, P cards with no
Yes,
activity.
yeah.
Okay, I thought you said cars.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, cards.
I have to check something here.
To that end, Councilman Hall, we actually do have an audit of the fuel system, including the number of vehicles underway. We will get to
Well,
that.
thank you. So you will audit the number of cards with no activity? Okay, thanks.
Why are you so red?
I'm embarrassed, of course.
Your face is red.
Any other questions? I was just curious. You said there were cash rebates each year. Do you know what that percentage is? Just curious.
I do not know what the percentage is.
We can get back to you on that. It was in the past several $100s a year, but we can certainly get back to you on that one.
It's not anything you really have to. Like I said, I was just kind of curious about that. In here, you had mentioned that with the card activities, and that the data revealed that 121 cards had less than 500 in purchases, et cetera, and all the other cards had purchases that were less than 100. So we were really looking at the maximum, nothing going to beyond 500, right? And I thought that, if I'm reading this correctly, and I thought that with what the Sheriff's Department has accumulated, which I'm glad to see they're using the process, I'm sure it's more efficient for them, but it just seemed to me like that was an awful lot of activity to get up to 300,000 when the 121 cards had only 500 or less.
You want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, there's 209 cards total that are being used, or that are active, like card numbers in the system. But essentially, we found that around 88 cards are really being used actively. And a
Right.
lot of those do come from the Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
So that test simply showed that there's 121 cards out of the 209 that are hardly being used. And that's what that test was to review.
Okay. Yeah, I never bothered to do the math to see exactly how quickly you could get a minimum less than $500 purchases and get up to 300. I never did the full math on it, but anyway, it's just something that stood out. The other thing was, I do like the fact that and I understand the issue with the sales tax. I mean, that is really important that we track that, and I can imagine how difficult that is for anyone, especially finance, to do it, and then trying to get a consistent method by which we can make sure the reimbursement is followed through with. So I thought that was very good. And I thought it was very good also that with the manager's sign-off time, they seem to be doing a great job with that, which I thought was good in that time period of 45 days. Make sure I'm not missing anything, because it's good with the PDF files, but you can't flip through paper like you this. So I have to scroll down and do one at a time.
Well, while you're looking,
Yeah, go ahead, thanks.
so it talks about the open checkbook, how it kind of, the people go online to look at what the county's spending money on, how it kind of groups them all together. And management said that they're looking at Bank of America to see if vendor information can be included in that. Is there any update from management, Wayne or anybody, about how that's proceeding? Or, is that possible for Bank of America to be able to do that sort of thing?
If I may, we plan on following up on all the
Okay.
findings that we indicated in this audit report, but I would like to say that the purchasing department is now controlling the purchase cards. Before, we had finance monitoring and doing the internal control on the purchasing cards. And I have to say that they've set up what we think is a robust system for monitoring these things. They've actually created a new manual, and they are very proactive in addressing all the issues that we brought up. We expect to follow up on them and have them all taken care of in short order, and we'll report back to you on that.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone else? Yeah, Jim.
On the sheriff's department, you've got sheriff's department, and then you've got sheriff's travel. And can you be more specific on the differential in that?
We did not dwell into it. That's the way that it's departmentalized in the Works program. A sheriff's department card would be a purchase card, and then a sheriff's travel card would be ones that have travel capabilities.
Okay, so the sheriff, in other words, the sheriff's department would be basically what purchases were made from the department, say for parts or equipment and things like that, and the other would be for just that they were traveling, say, to pick up prisoners or whatever.
Sure, but we could also get you a further breakdown if you'd like.
That's
It's more
fine. I just-
specific.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 102, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, resolution passes.
That's all we have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rezer. At this time, we open the floor for public comments. If you have any comments that you'd like to make, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and whatever your concern might be. There it is. Okay, this concludes public comments. Council comments. Seeing none, I tried to get barbecued chicken at the Allen Fire Company. I showed up at like 12 o'clock, and they were sold out at probably 10:30. So keep that in mind for the public in general. If you want barbecue chicken on Saturday at the Allen Fire Department, you better get there early. It's the second time I've been there,
John, you
and
have
they
to
were
get out
sold
of
out.
bed first.
I have to get out of bed before noon, right? So, anyway, that's the most I have to add to the county for the day. Entertain a motion, if I could, to adjourn from legislative session so that we can go into open work sessions.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. First item on the agenda for the open work session is Piedmont Airlines lease agreement. I don't see Mrs. Dawn Veach. That means we have Mr. Wayne Strausberg.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This lease was requested by La Hogue, Piedmont's president. And if you're familiar with the old terminal, behind the old terminal, there's a walkway, and it's not utilized, and it's not in a very good state of repair. And Lyle approached us and said that he would like to make the investment in that space to create a break room for the Piedmont employees. The anticipated expenditure that they'll make is $65,000. So that'll be improving space that would be usable space if Piedmont ever decides not to use it any longer. That being the case, we did not charge them rent. We viewed the improvements that they're making to the space as payment in lieu of rent.
How long will they be renting?
Till the termination of the current lease, Larry, for that old terminal space. Let me try to find it for you. My recollection is it was 2023.
5 years. 5 years, I think, Wayne.
Well, it says it's a 3-year lease beginning
Yeah,
on
but
9/1/17.
Yeah,
9/1/17, so
Yeah.
2021.
Well, I've got
yeah,
in front of me
2020.
also July 24th, 2017, lease agreement.
Well, the date of the lease, but the term would start beginning on September 1, 2017. I'm trying to find in here. I think they referenced the existing lease, so that's why I don't have the date
Okay,
But it's relatively short-term, Larry.
okay.
I think that terminal lease is expiring before the main lease is expiring.
Says it's 3 years with an option of another 3-year
Right,
addition on top, so it's 6 years
right.
total.
But in any event, it's space that I would not see the airport wanting to make an investment in. And if we had a important tenant who wanted to utilize the space for a good purpose and invest in the space for us, it's improving our property. And we felt that it was an appropriate deal to make with the carrier.
What's the amount of improvements, total cost gonna be?
65,000 is the
65, yeah.
estimate, Joe. Yeah, yeah,
I think you said that already.
yeah. I mean, it really amounts right now to sort of a screened-in walkway. So they're gonna turn it into, conditioned habitable space, if you will, for their employees. So I think it's good for the county.
And otherwise, it
Certainly
would
good
be
for
vacant if they didn't want to do something.
Otherwise, it would be just sitting there vacant and probably would continue to deteriorate, if you will, because it is exposed to the elements.
So what's in our brief book? Is this a lease for that addition, or is this the lease, is this the main lease for the entire?
No, this lease is an expansion of the leased space in the old terminal building.
So the,
If you look at the old tower, John, this space is out behind the old tower. It would have been the walkway when that tower was active. It would have been the covered walkway to the airplanes.
Right.
so the 6,175 square feet, is that for the entire old terminal?
That's their term, yeah, that's the total space.
So
This,
where am I missing the section that's talking about?
It's on page 94 is the amendment to that
yeah,
lease.
the space that they're
Okay.
talking about, John, is 21 feet wide by 53 feet in length. If you look at this drawing,
Oh, I got you. No, I'm okay, thank you.
See
Wayne.
it?
Yeah,
Got
I
it?
see it. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. I rushed through it.
that's okay.
Okay.
It's around
Yeah,
1,100 square
1,100
feet, as I
Yeah,
recall.
I see it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if they're making those kind of improvements, that does go a long way with what we would even
Sure.
charge them for 1,100 square feet.
Sure. And it's good for their employees, so we just felt it was appropriate.
Understood. Any questions? Any questions? Yeah, okay. This will come back to us, I assume, and will this come back to us in a formal resolution?
It will, you have to have a public hearing on it.
Let's have a public
and
hearing.
we can have that on October the 2nd.
Okay. All right, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the draft Wicomico County Priority Letter for Consolidated Transportation Program. Mr. Baker?
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
All right. So most of these projects you'll have seen before, but I do have a presentation if you want me to go over it, or we can just go over the letter and I can highlight the changes from last year. Your preference.
Why don't you just review what we have in front of us as far as the items in this letter?
Okay.
Is that okay?
All right. Starting with item 1 is the improvements for the Salisbury Airport. These were all submitted by Ms. Veach. Some items have been updated since last year.
Mr. Baker, could you explain to the public what this letter is?
Okay, yeah,
I mean, just so
certainly.
people know.
The CTP letter, or Consolidated Transportation Plan, is what I like to call the Maryland Department of Transportation's equivalent of our CIP, our Capital Improvement Plan. This letter highlights the items that the county is asking the state to pursue that we view, or they're typically in the capital project type range for improvements or studies we want the Department of Transportation to undertake. The majority of these projects are directed to the State Highway Administration. This first section is to the Maryland Aviation Administration. There's 7 modals within the Department of Transportation: the Port Authority, Mass Transit, the Toll Authority, State Highway, Maryland Aviation Administration, and I'm sure there's 1 or 2 other that I forgot. But yeah, so what this is highlighting to the state the items that we're asking them to investigate and improve here in the county. So again, the first item is for the improvements that we'd like assistance for at the airport, including things like runway extensions, drone facilities, improvements to taxiways, improvements to some of the buildings, distribution centers, and again, all this was passed on by the airport. The second item is or the second heading rather, is our roadway facility improvements. The first ask is for the relocation of the truck weight station on Route 13, just north of Salisbury, south of Delmar. Asking them to relocate that to a different location. I believe that project is in the works, and State Highway is investigating alternate locations.
Have they done some improvements out there to some of that scale house?
I don't believe so. I mean, they may have done some cosmetics. I knew some of the buildings over there, when I was at State Highway, were a little dilapidated, so I'm sure they probably had to make some improvements to keep things running as they're scouting out different locations. The second item is a newer item. It replaces the old number 2 item on the roadway improvements was the intersection of 60-foot road, adding a signal to that. That project is currently under construction, so we removed that from the list and replaced it with a request for a speed reduction on Mount Herman Road, which is Maryland 350, near the intersection of Wellston Switch Road. Councilman Holloway passed on a petition list of, I believe, 109 residents in the area to State Highway, and we will include that petition with this letter and present it also to the Department of Transportation at our tour dinner at the end of this month. All right. The next heading is for our planning initiatives. There are several here for the Salisbury bypass, making improvements to the ramps around US 50 eastbound and westbound. This is out by the Salisbury Mall.
Oh, excuse me 1 second here.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're fine.
The statement in the Mount Herman speed reduction says Wicomico County is requesting the speed limit be lowered to 40 miles per hour through this corridor. But that decision hasn't been made yet by this council.
No. This process is just presenting to the council the draft example of this letter. If you all are in agree with it, great, we move forward with it. If there's things you would like to see revised, please let me know. We can certainly go in and come to a consensus on what items need to be in the letter and present it to the Department of Transportation.
Okay, today's the work session. This letter is dated August 27th. Does that mean that this letter's already gone out?
No, the August 27th is the day I was drafting it up.
Okay.
No, so it is just a work session today. It will be on the council agenda for formal approval at the next legislative session, the 18th, I believe.
Okay.
So there's opportunity between now and then for comments, suggestions, revisions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Excuse me. Let's see, we talked about the Salisbury bypass feasibility planning. Also, the other section of the bypass is by Route 13. I might have had these backwards. I first mentioned the section by the Salisbury Mall. The other section is by Shorebird Stadium, that interchange where folks have to cross over the oncoming traffic to either get onto the bypass headed northbound.
So it's access points that we're looking at.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
What, do you know why they changed that clover leaf or whatever it was by the Shorebird Stadium? Because that looked like it was a good option at the time.
It's my understanding it had something to do with the turning radius for the trucks. I wasn't involved with the county or the state at that time, but again, I believe they could fitted in with the real estate that they had available, and was okay for cars. But I think there was an issue with the trucks turning there. I can't swear to that
Well,
though.
both intersections, the one just past Kmart, going southbound, and the one going northbound where you turn into traffic, been a lot of fatalities at both those intersections.
Yes, there have. I know they've made some improvements there, changing the one over by Forest Grove, I believe, from a yield condition to a stop condition, highlighted with some additional signs and pavement markings. But, I mean, you're right, there have been fatalities there even with those.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you keeping this as a priority because, you know, we talked about this with Weston probably a couple years ago. And it is so true that when they put the bypass up, the interchanges just seem to be done as an afterthought. Really, you really think about how difficult it is to get on and get off sometimes and how they've placed these and you have to cross through traffic to access. So I'm glad to see that you kept that as a high priority.
Okay.
Good to see what the solution is. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like
It's a tall order.
Councilman Dodd said, revising to a clover leaf or some variation.
Yeah.
The next priority was a safety study and traffic signal warrant study for the intersection of Maryland 12 and Nutters Cross. The state put up look again signs when you're coming off Nutters Cross trying to turn on to Maryland 12. But again, it's another intersection where there are frequent crashes. And
Speed limit may have a factor in it.
Speed
People in a
limit.
hurry to pull out of that development.
yeah, the geometry of that intersection is less than ideal to it. When you approach it, it's at a skewed angle, so you're having to look over your shoulder to try to. So there may be some ways to improve that. The next improvement we're requesting is for an access management study so that Warwick can have direct access off and onto Route 50 directly instead of having to travel through the traffic circle and the Royal Farms traffic and the roundabout and
Can you add
Arby's.
something to the effect of getting rid of the traffic circling?
I was gonna mention
That is, I
Yeah.
don't mind traffic circles. That's a
There's
convoluted
another
mess.
question on the traffic circle.
Sorry.
I like that traffic.
This one for Warwick's been on there for years. They've never considered it, I don't think, have they?
The challenge with this one is they have to break access control, which involves going to the federal level. And because a lot of how the state funds these improvements with, there's certain plots of money that they get, and when they say they're gonna build a road and it's gonna be access controlled, and then you go back and you break those access controls, there's a lot of legal paperwork, there's a lot of cost involved with it. It's not an easy task. I can tell you from my experience with State Highway, there are things that counties frequently ask for year after year after year after year. To give you an example, Ocean City, they want a new 50 drawbridge, they want 2 more lanes added to Maryland 90. They are long-term asks that you just keep asking for and asking for until something moves up. So if it's something we want off the list, that's certainly easy enough to do. If it's something that the council still wants to pursue, we just keep asking until it gets addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Excuse me. The fourth item is a new item. This is a request that's related to the drainage improvements along Nanacoke Road. And when I say along Nanacoke Road, I mean the entire corridor. We're asking for a drainage study. One of the items that came about from the recent drainage outreach meetings we had was how many, I'll call them hot spot locations that we have along that corridor where folks are experiencing problems with flooding. There's some on the northern end, there's some on the southern end, but what we're looking for is help from State Highway to pinpoint how best to get the water off of Nanacoke Road and into an accepting body of water. And we understand we'll have to partner with them to help provide access, to help, if they're draining into our ditch, then we have to clean ours. But over the years, ditches have sedimented in, and the question is, how was Nanticoke originally supposed to drain? How is this water supposed to get off? Does that way still make sense, or is there now a better way to approach it? And that's the ask for these.
That would be good. The last storm we had, I ran into a gentleman who's about a quarter mile from his house with a pitchfork and a shovel, going down and clearing out some of the ditches because he recognized the fact that that was flooding his front yard, and he just knew that nobody was doing anything about it. So he was trying to do what he could. With the drainage improvement study, was there possibly someone looking at this last week or the week before? Because there was a vehicle there with yellow lights on the top, and they had a gentleman out on the street with some type of survey equipment.
Was that around Willow Creek?
Yes.
Yes, that is one of our, identified hot spots. Willow Creek floods frequently. That field just sheets right into the community.
Yeah.
We actually had water damage on our road, which is Willow Creek. That is what I'll say, with that being a hot spot, that's getting addressed separately from this drainage study. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit. We know what we need. We need basically a swale running along Nanticoke Road on the farm field side to pick that water up, get it into a pipe, get it under Nanticoke Road, and then into the existing drainage system. The state's a slow-moving entity, though. They've got a lot of environmental regs they have to check off before, so it's probably going to be about a 1.5-year process before we see something out there.
Well, that's
moving
good,
forward.
because it's a 10-year storm, so you'll be okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm good to see it, but those were state employees?
Yes, I've met out there State Highway a couple times.
Good.
And they are doing their surveying, figuring out what permits they need and all of that.
Was there anything from the study that we did that was beneficial to help them with any of it? Just curious.
There were some identified crossing points along 349 that could be used to do some improvements along there. Some related to Barrington Ridge and some related to Pratt Road and such.
Okay. It's a good priority to me.
The next one is also related to drainage. Along the US 50, US 13 bypass by Peggy Neck Branch, which is essentially right next to the railroad that runs along parallel to Old Ocean City Road. That branch had sedimented in over the years. We got out there and took a look, and there's significant ruts developed along the bypass where the water is sheeted off and carried sediment into the branch. We've been working with State Highway locally to get those areas cleared out, and they have done that. They've opened up channels through there, but there is still a significant amount of sediment that's coming off, and basically it is going to keep building up, and another good storm will wash that sediment right back into the branch. We've spoken with some State Highway employees, and what they've told us is there's no short-term fix, but they do have a fix. They're working on a long-term fix to stabilize the embankments of the bypass, but it is potentially a 2-year process. So that's why our suggestion is to include this on there so that they recognize that we recognize this is a problem area that needs to get addressed to keep that branch open. Because keeping Peggy Neck open and clear and free-flowing is what helps the folks living along Old Ocean City Road. They're keeping their houses from flooding. All right, the next one is under pedestrian improvements. These are for sidewalks, crossings along the Route 13 business corridor, mostly concentrated on the north end. Between Zion Road on the south, the next closest crossing for pedestrians is Conley Mill. So when you go up in front of the Salisbury Mall, when you go in front of Walmart, when you go in front of Chili's, there's no way for folks to get from one side to the other. Now, typically it's not that bad for pedestrians, but it's also the theory of if you build it, they will come. And what you can frequently see when we have things like the USSA softball tournament are folks out staying on the Hampton Inn side trying to get over to Panera or vice versa. They're bouncing back and forth, and there's just no pedestrian amenities through one of the heavily traveled areas in the county. So again, we felt like this was an area that needed some pedestrian improvements to avoid fatalities and pedestrian crashes. Okay. The next sections are municipal requests. These were forwarded to us by the city of Salisbury, town of Delmar, Hebron, and also Pittsville.
Will they be, there to make their case, the folks from these towns at the meeting?
I believe they do receive an invitation to the, yes. And and typically what we've done is included in our presentation their bullet points and go over them with State Highway and with the folks from the Department of Transportation. They're all, of course, more than welcome to develop their own presentation if they like. They tend to rely on us to do that. We haven't heard any complaints so far. With that, those are the changes. Again, the reductions out of the previous year's letter is taking out 60-foot road. The new additions are Mount Herman Road speed study, the two drainage improvements items, and then also the town of Pittsville's requests are new to this year's letter.
I would like to make a request additionally to this, that we put a letter in thanking the State Highway Administration for their work on the 60-foot road intersection. It's been a long time coming, if the council agrees.
I don't think there's anybody objecting.
Okay, I'll add that. All right. Any other questions?
No questions. All right. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the installation of street signs on county roads. Mr. Paul Wilbur. Good evening, Mr. Wilbur. How are you? You have the floor.
I think Dallas might be able to participate in this too, or Weston. I think in any county or town, installation of street signs is largely a function of engineers in a public works department. They have sets of regulations that they have to follow for both traffic control signals, stop signs, yield signs, no left turn. It's a matter of engineering expertise. Did the council have specific questions about this?
Yeah, this may have been my suggestion to bring this on. So someone contacted me a couple months ago about putting up a stop sign, so I inquired what the process was. It's a little stop sign kind of down in Tyaskin, affected about, I don't know, I'd say maybe 20 people. And I remember that we had approved some no parking signs a couple of years ago. So, I said, I think the council may have to approve that. And, then we looked, I asked some questions, and there's really no process, it seems. Mm-hmm. And it seems that a lot of people kind of assumed the council had to approve that, because when a stop sign went up, I heard from all 20 people that were affected by it, basically that, kind of the view was that, they thought the process, public comments and things like that weren't taken into consideration. But, I think we've ironed out the problems there, but it does raise the issue of what is the process for stop signs. And I guess it used to be a council issue before the executive form of government came on. And I think some people still have that expectation and, what to do when people want road signs and street signs. Mm-hmm. I think it would be good to have something laid out. I don't think it necessarily needs to be the council doing it. I mean, we don't need to micromanage that, but it would be good that if someone has a request, so they're not, roads just isn't,
Sure.
Oh, they want a stop sign, let's put up a stop sign. That there's something so that people can have some idea of like, all right, if that's what we want or that's needed here, what do we do? So.
Sure. I think that a process to both answer questions about why is there a traffic control or why is there not a traffic control should be directed to Public Works. I think they're the people that have the books with the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess the question would be that I think the council used to have some sort of a role to play in this, and that, you know, like I said, a couple of years ago, we put up no parking signs, we approved a resolution for that. Do we need to clarify that we don't have a role to play? Does the council not want a role to play? I'm not sure, you know, I mean, I don't know that we need to have a role to play. It is, you know, we're not the experts in traffic, you know.
Right.
So, but, you know, the public also sometimes feels that they need you know, major changes are being made, they want a voice to play, and I guess we're the body where the people get to speak up. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that, you know, people don't feel their voices are heard on this. People get pretty upset over it. So I'm not sure what the answers are, but I'm not sure if any of the other council members have an issue, but it might be good to clarify some of this stuff. So.
Weston Young, Assistant Director of Administration. Dallas, are you familiar with the specific Tyaskin?
Yes.
Okay, I think Dallas talking on that, but I think the, when these are considered, the traffic engineering term is called a warrant. Does the intersection warrant a traffic signal or four-way stop or pedestrian, you know, so depending on the amount of traffic and the use, a different traffic control method is usually warranted. Specifically, I don't know.
Well, the Tyaskin situation, I mean, I don't think roads or public works did anything wrong. I mean, they've been very good in responding to, you know, I mean, so it's just a situation where, you know, people were, you know,
The public input.
Yeah, just kind of confused, you know, everyone kind of thought, oh, the county council does this sort of stuff because that's the way it's always been done. But that's not the way it necessarily has to be done under an executive form of government. So it was that sort of confusion about the process. So I'm not criticizing public works or roads in any way. So just to make that clear, so.
Just to kind of walk through the process, typically when we get a request in for some type of alteration of traffic controls, especially if it's regulatory in nature, a stop sign, a yield sign, then what we'll do is, there, like Wes mentioned, there's a series of warrants outlined in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices that we have to go through and evaluate for changing something like a speed limit, putting up a stop sign, that type of condition. And what we'll do is we'll go through, perform those studies, and then make recommendations to the executives about the proposed changes and get that buy-in. Because again, like you mentioned, it's my understanding that those all go through the administration now. As far as something like a no parking or something, or permitting parking, those changes are a little bit more subjective, and we tend to rely on what the surrounding community wants. To give you an example, there's a potential parking change along Dogwood Drive coming up from requests we've received from the community for the ability to have traffic stop queuing up so far along Dogwood Drive between SU and the church. So there's some lane revisions that are coming up again, and that's not regulatory in nature, but that's working with the community, both the church and with SU, to address their traffic control issues, along with letters that we've received from the community. But in any case, it's what we tend to see happen is we'll receive requests in for a change in traffic control devices. We'll analyze it, and if it makes sense, we put it in, and then we'll start getting calls in about, hey, why'd you change that? I liked it the way it was. Well, yeah, so it's a difficult challenge to.
Yeah, I mean, so with traffic, are you thinking that still needs to come before the county council, or is that all on, you know, your side of the table there doing that, you know, or parking, I mean?
Well, again, what we'll do is we make the evaluations
Yeah.
and then make recommendations to the administration
Okay.
with our recommendation of what meets warrants, what doesn't meet warrants.
This seems to be one of the many things that we've run into since the government changed back in '06 of, you know, where does the powers lie? You know, does the executive do it? Does the council do it? It's just another one of the examples of this. But what we don't want to get away from, or where we don't want to head with this, is to make it so complicated that it never gets done. You know, like the speed limit on Mount Herman Road, you know, people's been asking for this for a year or two now, and, you know, haven't had any luck with it. So I think a firm policy needs to be done, and I know that the county roads, from my experience, always tries to work, with requests from the county council if, we have something. I know a few years ago, we had a situation with a speed limit over on Alton Road, and, that turned out to be a long, drawn-out process before it was over with. So we don't want to complicate this thing too much to make it hard to get done in the end, so.
I guess my question would be to Mr. Wilbur, if you were familiar with what other executive forms of government, what other counties that have executive forms of government, what their code states as far as, the handling of this, because this is a very, because this is a very common practice in all counties, I'm sure. And there has to be a process, and this is just one of those holdouts that we happen to have where again, the form of government changed and it didn't catch everything. And I think that's what we're looking at here. So I think the simple solution might be just to see how the other counties are doing it that have an executive form of government, and just see how far this has to go, whether it has to be introduced by the executive and then approved by the council. Would you not think that would?
Yeah, I mean, or even
solve
if, I mean, a lot of those signs probably we don't even need to do it, but it would be good to have an answer for people that, if you want this type of sign, then we need to go before the council, but most other signs don't. I mean, just some clarity so people know.
I agree.
Don't, whether it's the council member or whether it's, talk to Dr. Rhodes. I mean, that sort of clarity, I think, is what was kind of missing. in these sort of things.
If I may, for the non-subjective traffic improvements, like Dallas mentioned, there's a federal document, the MUTCD, that we follow, and if I see a potential situation where a stop sign or a change is warranted, and we come for approval, we don't get that approval, and if there's an accident there, we could be liable. If we know that a certain traffic control measure is needed, and we do not install it because, let's say, we come before council and it gets voted down, we put ourselves at risk in that situation.
Well, maybe.
So, for the non-subjective, for the do we close a road for or a section of a road for parking, that can go either way, and I think community input is critical. But what is warranted by a traffic control or traffic design standards, I feel deviating from that would be put us in potential liability.
I think that needs to stay with Public Works.
So the code could reflect that, though, right?
Sure.
Code could
Yeah.
reflect that we do not want to be in violation of any other standards, federal,
Right.
state standard.
Yeah. So let's see what's discretionary, let's see what sort of mandatory with Public Works. I'll come back to you.
Okay.
We'll all come back with
Sounds good.
information. Yep.
And who
Okay.
makes the decision if something is warranted?
That's out of the federal standards, Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Maryland has its own version that they've tweaked. Like most federal aids, the state can have their own if they're equal to or more stringent than the feds. And there are, mostly when you get into the details, there's certain signs that Maryland doesn't use, certain traffic control
So in
devices.
our case, who would be the one making that decision?
About whether something's warranted or not. Again, we go back to that manual, and there are a series of tests that you run to see, if somebody wants to change, what's the traffic volume? How many crashes have you had? How severe have the crashes been? What's been the time of the occurrence? There's a list of things that go into a collection of data that you then put into these formulas, and it says, okay, here's what you.
So Dallas Baker will say this is warranted.
Yes, and I will, and then make that recommendation to, I'll just say the powers that be. Here's Public Works' recommendation, here are the warrants that it meets. Do you agree? And then, yes,
that's what I
no,
was getting
and move forward.
The more complex project, so if you had a major development that was going to increase traffic, we would definitely sub that out to a, traffic engineering firm to do all the, what is the current traffic demands, what are the proposed traffic demands, and then, all right, if we go out to 2050 or 2100, what are we going to see in terms of increase in population and how that affects things? So that goes back to, we run it through a warrant analysis to see, does it warrant the traffic control, or what does it warrant? Do we need a four-way intersection there, or are we good with just two stop signs and a throughway, flashing lights? There's a process that, and one of the things we mentioned, this MUTCD document, that's for consistency across the country. There's a reason why our stop signs look the same as the city of Salisbury's, as Delaware's. If we didn't have that consistency, as soon as you cross a municipal or state line, things could look totally different. It's important that there's that consistency. Same with the traffic analysis.
But in the end, you have, I know you have your manuals you have to follow, but also you have to take into consideration what the citizens want. Because they're the ones using the intersections, like the citizens that called Mark. Some of them wanted a stop sign, some of them didn't want the stop sign, so you have to take that in consideration. Correct?
If the formulas all say there should be a stop sign and the county ignores it, I think
That's
then we've
correct.
got a liability
But
situation.
on the other side of the table, if it says they don't, if the formula says they don't need a stop sign, but all the neighbors want one, what harm is it having one? You see what I'm saying? I mean, does that mean you don't put one there because your formula says it doesn't call for it, but you have all your citizens wanting it?
I think it's good to suggest in whatever you bring forward, that you suggest that maybe in this document that we recognize what the federal restrictions or the state restrictions might be, but that simply is something that we recognize, and it isn't something that we mandate in the document.
Sure.
It wouldn't be a mandate, because like Joe says, you don't want to overcomplicate it. There could be something very simple where you have just a few people on one road that would like a stop sign, period, and the state might, or the guidelines might say, well, no one's been killed in 10 years. Maybe we don't want to wait for somebody to get killed.
Sure.
And it's simple enough. So we would like to have the option to override it, not as if it's a solid mandate.
And just to be clear too, if something meets warrants, does not mean it is a shall condition. There are numerous intersections in the state
Okay, yeah.
that meet the warrant for a traffic signal. But when you look at the community, like you're describing, it just doesn't make sense. There are places where sometimes putting something in just because it meets the numbers doesn't pass the common sense test. So there always is that,
It's always an exception.
Yeah. I was going to give an example. Speed humps on a road are frequently requested, and it's like that's not something that if that road is meant to be a through road, we're not going to slow it down with that necessarily, or it may be a threat to an ambulance trying to, if that is a path that emergency personnel take. Just because one person wants a speed hump, it doesn't necessarily warrant it. So,
plows,
there's-
it'll kill our plows.
yeah, and
See how well-
snow plows.
See how well a speed bump would work on Fire Tower Road. That would
You will catch air. Okay.
Okay, let's see what we can find out and report back.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. So one, I guess, would be what you would find out as far as what needs to be established as regulations, and the other would be the process.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
So do we have an intersection in particular that we want to look at?
I think it was, I don't know, Ms. Councilman Kilmer, was there
No,
a
we're good. I'm
ulterior motive
We're
there?
done with that. Done with that intersection. We're good.
Okay,
Everybody seems okay now.
okay.
We didn't want to drag.
Thanks for your time,
I
gentlemen.
think Mark's looked at it, right?
Yeah. A lot of time.
Next item on the agenda is the Health Department lease agreement. We have Mr. Strasburg coming for a second appearance, and I know that we have the Health Director is here, and somebody else, a third party.
Two third parties. Can you introduce yourselves?
Lori Brewster, Health Officer.
John McClellan, SVN Miller Commercial Real Estate.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
You will recall that in the budget cycle, we talked about the issue that we're having in the lower level at the Hurdle Building with hydrostatic pressure that's buckling the slab and creating trip hazards. And you recall that we embedded in the operating budget not only money to rent a swing space, because we estimate that it'll take 2 or maybe 3 years to investigate the problem, because we've got to demolish that floor, that space, and we have to understand what's causing the hydrostatic pressure, and then determine whether or not there's a way to alleviate and offload that hydrostatic pressure. So we have located the space. One of the things that was a little bit difficult with locating a swing space like this is the fact that we wanted a relatively short-term lease, but we may need a longer-term lease, so we wanted a short-term lease with options, but also with the option to cancel the lease if we resolve the problem at Hurdle. So the space, after we've been looking for probably a year, the space that we arrived at is at the E.S. Adkins building. It's the main building. The space that's provided is adequate. It's in near move-in condition. We'd have to do virtually nothing in terms of ulterior alterations. And we can provide you, should have put this in the brief book, but here's a term sheet that will probably make it easier for you to understand exactly what it is, what the business terms of the lease are.
Four going that way. Make sure you get that. At least.
So this is 2018 to 2023, and then we can,
After 3 years, we can terminate. If we terminate, we have to give 6 months' notice, and we have to pay 2 months' rent as a forfeiture, if you will.
and
But it
then,
allows us to get out of the space early if we can rectify the issues at Hurdle.
and then does that 3 years apply after 2023 too? Can we go another, let's say it's a real big problem, I mean, or is that, you're just not envisioning that as an issue?
I think after 3 years, even
It's
in
at
the-
any time after.
At any time
after
after
year
3
3.
years.
So you can stay for 11 years,
Right.
Oh, okay.
or you could stay for 3 years and pay 2 months to get out.
So it gives us flexibility. We think it's a market rent. It's a good space. We already have the dental clinic there.
And WIC.
Um,
And WIC.
and WIC. And it's really a good location for the services that are provided. So we feel it's an appropriate solution, and we're bringing it to you this evening to see whether or not you have any questions, whether or not you have comments that you'd like to make.
You had noted in the budget that you had allotted for this ahead of time.
Yes.
Was that the line item for rent, the $75,000 line item for rent?
Yeah. And we'll probably spend, John, in this fiscal year, if we move expeditiously, we'll spend about $60,000. So we'll be coming in under budget.
Well, for this year, you'll spend a lot less than that. I mean,
Well, we'll probably have 6 months of rent.
Moving costs.
We'll have some moving costs.
it's about 45,000.
On the carpet, it doesn't state, you know, what kind of carpet. I mean, there's so many different kinds, quality-wise. I mean, do we have any say on what kind of carpet's going to be used? I say they're going to paint interior, but they're going to, says replace carpet. I mean, carpet can
It's
average
replacing it with the same grade of carpet that's already there. It's just stained. It's the same grade of carpet that we have in the executive office. So, you know, we're
I mean,
You're
Good on
not going to get you know, for lack of a better word, a Walmart special carpet. You're going to get a commercial grade carpet because the landlord's going to make a substantial investment. The carpet, 12,000 feet is not cheap. And if you do leave in 3 years, they're not going to want to go do it again. So we'll specify, and we can specify in the lease document. I don't know carpet well enough, but I would say,
I don't
you
either,
know,
but I just noticed you kind of left it wide open there.
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so.
It's not meant to be vague, it's not meant to be specific,
Right.
but I would assure you, if you go there now and look at the grade of finishes, they're not gonna do something cheap to go with those grade of finishes.
The parking space is adequate there? I mean, how many more, how much additional parking do you think you might add to that, you know, that facility?
The parking will be adequate there. It will be moving approximately 25 to 30 people out of the parking garage here into the parking lot over there.
It's adequate and it's free.
Absolutely.
That's great. No, that helps too.
There is such thing as free lunch.
And how is the, was it the common area maintenance? That is, I see there's a fixed charge for it, and then it's kind of settled up at the end of the year. Yeah, I mean, what percentage are we using for the common area?
It's a fixed charge,
Yeah,
Mark. It's below what they're spending right now.
okay.
They have to provide us with an accounting
At the end.
of the common area charges for the year. And we know the total square footage of the entire complex, so we would know per square
If it's-
foot how much has been spent. And I suspect that it will be at least as much as we're being charged, if not more.
Well, I mean, it says issue a credit or invoice to tenant for the actual difference. So if you,
Correct.
let's say you look at that and you say, we think we're being overcharged. Is there a
Correct.
mechanism for you to go in there and, I mean, is it only, can only the landlord essentially determine, if you're being overcharged or undercharged on that, or do we have any power to kind of dispute that? You see what I'm saying?
These charges are going to be routine operating costs.
Okay.
This building is a typical commercial office building where you have kind of a common lobby.
Yeah.
You've got 2 restrooms up, 2 restrooms down that are shared.
Okay.
They are passcode protected, so you just can't have people wandering in off the street to use them. So both supplies, cleaning, maintaining the common areas, the elevators, exterior lighting, all that kind of stuff, that's all included in typical common area maintenance. The lease will also include what's not included in common area maintenance. We can't go renovate a tenant for some other tenant's suite in another building and say, oh, hey, that was common area charges. We can't pay interest in mortgage, we can't pay taxes or management fees and things like that, that are a landlord's capital or other operating expense. So those will all be defined. We actually, I'll be honest with you, this number's lower than what it's costing us. The E.S. Atkins has always kind of done a fixed, what they call CAM charge. I've been encouraging them as a broker, you should reconcile this because you could be costing yourself money if you're not collecting all the operating expenses. In the course of this, as Wayne and I talked about it, their expenses are probably over $350 a square foot for taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance. You're going to pay $250, and that number is going to, it says 3% annual increase, it's going to go up at 3%. Wayne has asked for an accounting. The lease will call for an accounting. If the CAM charges are $5 a square foot, you don't pay any more. If they're $2 a square foot, you will get a credit. I don't think they'll ever be $2 unless somebody cuts the taxes, including y'all.
I think if there were $2 a square foot, we would be unhappy with the maintenance of the facility.
That is a fairly reasonable number in the broad market.
Yeah, sounds a little low to me, actually, because that does include snow removal, I assume,
It's in there.
He
right?
wants us to pay.
Snow removal, cutting grass,
Ma-
landscaping, exterior lighting.
No, it sounds high, I'm sorry.
Even window washing twice a year.
Well,
Yes.
and maintenance of the parking lot and the parking
Yes.
area also.
Ceiling, striping. Again, if we overlay new blacktop,
Right.
that's not maintenance. If we fix a pothole, that's maintenance. The other thing you're dealing with here is you got the economies of scale. This is 73,000 square feet of area maintained.
Right.
So it spreads that
Spreads
pretty
the
flat.
load.
Spreads the load, yeah.
Ms. Brewster, how many employees will be moving out to this area from where they're at now?
There's about 30 individuals that will be housed in that area from the basement.
Okay, so we're paying a lot of money in parking fees for the top of the parking garage. Is that going to be reduced
Yes, by 30.
by 30?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's charged per employee.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Yeah.
what's that going to save us a year?
It's $40 a month, isn't it?
40
Per employee.
per employee, okay.
Yep.
So,
So there's some savings
yeah,
there.
good. That's good.
So are these are, these employees on the first floor or the basement area?
Yes.
Is that gonna be empty now?
That is our goal. It
Are there
is-
30 people in the basement? Or
Yes.
So, okay, so is that so that you can continue with the renovations, or what are we going to do down there once we move everybody out?
We've got to do demolition, John, because we've got to get below grade to determine where the hydrostatic pressure is coming from, what's causing that hydrostatic pressure,
Which is causing what for the public?
buckling of the floor.
Okay.
So buckling of the floor. So you've got water pressing up on the slab in the basement, and it's buckling that slab. So throughout that lower level, you've got trip hazards. And it's just a situation that we can't continue with.
And you've tried to fix it.
And we've had several engineering studies done, but we haven't done an actual, let's start to demolish that slab and find out what's going on down there. So we really have a choice. Our choice is either we find out what's going on down there and we figure out how it can be remedied, if it can be remedied, or we simply vacate the space, seal it off. In which case, however, if you ever want to do something with that building, if you wanted to sell the building at some point in time in the future, you know, you've got an infirmity there that A, you're probably going to have to deal with, or B, is really going to devalue the property. So we really have to determine, is the remedy and the restoration going to increase the building's viability and potential value? And we don't know that until we determine what's going on down there. We have a working theory, but you don't know until you open it up.
About a block away, there's a building that I had to go into one time, and the basement was flooded. So I had the city look into it, and they came back to me and said, well, it floods every time it's high tide.
It may well be tidal, Larry. I mean, as you know, additional floors were added to that building. That exerted additional load on the foundation, on the soil. I don't know what the construction of the slab was at the time. You know that we have a lot of clay, what are called plastic soils in the county. When you exert downward load on plastic soils that have hydrostatic pressure, it causes this type of heaving. But we don't know until we open it up. It's just theory
A lot
right
of this area
now.
was underwater
Yes,
at one
yes,
time.
yeah.
You know, for perspective on the operating budget, my math may be rough, but I came up with about $118,000 a year total
For a full year.
expenses.
That's
For a full
absolutely
year.
right, John. That's absolutely right.
And that's almost a 20 to 25% increase in your operating budget from 2017, 2018 year.
It'll be an increase.
It's a 20 to 25% increase of your operating budget. So I'm wondering as to how long we sustain that.
I won't know until I open up the building, and then I can come back and say with some level of certainty, this is the issue that we're dealing with, and it can either be remedied or not remedied. We're working on other alternatives for permanent space. We're working with the state, but that's a slow process, as you may know.
Well, Wayne, you did say it's a slow process, just as I was thinking, but we've been talking about this for a while now. What's the timeline? What's the next step? When are they going to go in and evaluate?
As soon as Lori relocates her
As
people,
soon as they vacate?
we have, I think the number in the operating budget this year is $165,000 to do the internal investigation of just what's going on down there. That doesn't contemplate what the remedy would be, but it does contemplate, we think we could get a look at what's going on, go around the perimeter, do demolition around the perimeter,
Soil sample.
and determine where the water's coming from. Yeah.
It might affect the whole downtown. A lot of
Well,
flooding.
Yeah, I mean, Larry does make a really good point.
No,
Based on the
absolutely.
expenses, not only of the leasing, but then with the work we have to anticipate. I mean, these are some very serious expenses we're going to be looking at over the next couple of years, probably doubling your budget, your operating budget. but there's not much you can do. It's there, and it has to be,
Yeah,
it
I
has to be
mean,
fixed.
you know, if I thought there was a viable alternative to this, I would have offered it up, but
Yeah.
we don't know what we're dealing with, and until we do, we really can't make intelligent decisions.
Would that building,
I would say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, that building, how long ago was it renovated? It was almost completely renovated.
25 years ago.
We
25
we
and-
moved in 1996.
And they didn't discover anything then, at that point? with the water table?
Story has it, I wasn't part of that discussion, but when they added on the other 2 floors, they had to bail out water. Put in pumps to get the water out at that time. We managed 16 years in the building before water intrusion, but we haven't seen anything quite like we've got now, and it is a serious risk management issue at this point, because it's just a matter of time before somebody
mold?
falls. No, not that we've found
We've
at
done
this
stuff.
point.
So it is one of your options relocating altogether?
Yeah.
Didn't know if that's been discussed or not.
It hasn't been discussed until we determine what's going on, Larry. I mean, you know, I think there are probably 4 factors involved. One is the vertical load from the additional floors. In speaking with some of the engineers we work with, there's also a thought that when the parking garage was built, the foundation of the parking garage may in fact be impeding flow of the groundwater, and it's got no place to go, so you get upward vertical pressure. We know that we have experienced increasing high tides. We know that we have sea level rise. So I think all those factors combine, you've got a basement in what was a dry lake bed, and that's probably not a good idea. Whether or not we can design something that would mitigate that, I just don't know. I've got some thoughts on it, but again, until we open it up, we don't know.
What's it gonna cost?
Right.
I would say from a real estate perspective, if you did vacate the building today, every buyer in the world is going to want to know the answers to the questions you're about to
That's right.
find out.
It's gonna be
Correct.
difficult
You
to
may
sell.
find out it's going to cost you some number that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But if you don't have that number, believe me, a buyer's going to come up with a big what if.
That's right.
And then the county gets a big hit in the head if they decided to sell it. So getting that information is good.
Any other questions in reference to the lease?
Yeah, one more question. What are the
We
5
need a public
units?
hearing, right?
Are you planning on taking these 5 units? Like 101, 102, 105, 201,
Floor
202?
plan here.
There's floor plan in here
Or the
someplace.
floor plan on the
Larry.
back of the
The
proposal.
ones that you had highlighted yellow.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
That'll all
There
be-
you go.
That'll
Yep.
all be
Yep.
occupied.
Yes.
So we do need to schedule a public hearing, and as much as this is a multi-year lease, so,
You can have it October 2nd.
October 2nd.
Thank you,
Great.
Ms. Hurley.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
you.
Appreciate your time.
Next item on the agenda is the update on the Conley Mill property. Mr. Weston Young, I know you're here today. Gentlemen, could you just state your name, please?
Sure.
For the record.
Good evening again. Weston Young, Assistant Director of Administration.
Steve Smethurst, attorney for Conley Millis Limited Partnership.
Steve Miller, Director of Recreation, Parks and Tourism.
So, wanted to come before you this evening to give you an update on the Connolly Mill property. We discussed it about a year ago, and we were offered a donation of approximately 235 acres north and adjacent to the Henry Parker complex. We had an appraisal performed, and it came back a little over $1 million. Some information about the site: it's located in the city corporate limits, has no water and sewer currently run to it. It's zoned R8A, which is a multifamily, that's a city zoning. There were 2 ponds excavated. One has a footprint of 16 acres, the other 21 acres, used for borrow area for the bypass. However, they were part of a larger stormwater development of the site, and we have, I believe, a plat of that available if you're interested in the history of it. So after we did the appraisal, we then performed a Phase 1 and a limited Phase 2 environmental study. What came back was several red flags, namely in the form of metal contamination. The limited Phase 2 involved some grab water samples in the standing water that was there, and it contained seriously high levels of lead, which was the big concern. Ultimately, and you all probably remember it like it was yesterday, we decided not to pursue the donation. In that time, still having concerns with high levels of lead in the water, and that is right next to and a part of the site is in the Paleo Channel. The city municipal wells, at least for the Paleo Channel region, are located in that area. Concurrently, while I reached out to MDE to start discussions of, okay, how can you guys help analyze this to see, do we have concerns, or are concerns justified, and is there any assistance for a private entity remediating said site? The owners of the site pursued additional soil and groundwater testing. I then sent the Department of the Environment all of the documents the county funded, and then included what the owners had funded. And in your brief book is an attached letter from MDE that basically, in summary, said the site did not present a risk to health. There are trace amounts of lead in the soil, and even when you go down really far, they said it could be steam engines from back in the day. However, they did not have the concerning levels that we thought. The groundwater wells that were utilized, the groundwater came back minimal results, and they believe the grab samples of our limited Phase 2 was poor sampling technique. It was turbid water, it was muddy, it did not represent what is actually out at the site. So in summary, MDE came back that no additional action is necessary. So one of the other things, so in a nutshell, that's where we are today. The concerns of the municipal wells being contaminated with lead is not a concern, so the city can breathe a sigh of relief there. And that what we considered previously to be a contaminated site not worth donation isn't necessarily the case. The other thing we worked on in the time since we got this letter from the state, just to see if it was an option, is transferring program open space. And Steve Miller can go into more detail with his conversations with the state. But the question is, if we have property we acquired with program open space money that the situation has changed and we no longer need that property protected for public use, we could transfer those rights. So while last council meeting I came before you with some properties to consider surplusing, those were the low-hanging fruit. There's some larger parcels out there that we may or may not have acquired with program open space that requires additional research, and how do we get out of them? Like, why have them if we're not utilizing them is a question. So specifically, we looked at the property, and again, Steve can go into details, the West Metro Core Park property. Since it's been acquired, we've had a farming lease on it. We do not have water and sewer, and it would be over 2 miles of water and sewer run to get it to that site to fully develop it. I'm going to turn it over to Steve briefly to talk about that particular property, but in the conversations he's had with the state, they would consider the transfer of the program open space easements and restrictions from, say, the West Metro Core parcel to Connolly Mill. So if we were to reconsider the donation of the Conley Mill property, that would then free up this property that we no longer have intentions of using, and we could then sell, just like the other properties I brought before you. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Steve to just touch on the recreation and parks aspects of this.
Sure. Yeah, with respect to program open space, when we purchase land with acquisition funds of program open space, we're bound to those forever. With development projects, there's a 20-year shelf life, but acquisition, we're bound. There is a conversion process if you wanted to change that. It has to meet 3 basic qualifications. It's got to be equal or greater to, the new property would have to be equal or greater to acreage, appraisal value, and then recreational value to citizens. So that's generally the qualifications to at least start the conversion process. With respect to the West MetroCorps, Weston referenced that property. We did just inquire, just an initial inquiry, if we were to consider, if the council and the executive wanted to consider pursuing that. The initial test was this is something that would qualify. It would be a 12-month roughly process to convert it, but that would meet those 3 basic qualifications.
How many acres at the West Metro?
About 100.
And there's 247 acres with this
Just under
property?
235, yes.
235.
So this would meet those qualifications. In terms of recreational value, that's a little more subjective, that we would have to make a case. But from where I sit, I think the opportunity at this property being adjacent to a marquee facility like Parker, the potential opportunities that you could either add amenities to the existing park or add additional ball fields, any number of things that I think would require some time and public input and a lot of research, but I think the opportunities there would certainly be greater than what we have at West MetroCorps. We've been farming it, and at this point, that's what it is. So,
And speaking of amenities, as I presented last year, one of the thoughts would be to take the 2 existing stormwater ponds and fully excavate those deeper. That would provide cover material for the landfill. And they would then in turn be water features. Some of the questions, we've had time to research this. The surface mining for counties, we're basically exempt from state regulations. We have to fill out a basic permit, and it's always good to do a public hearing even if it's not required. However, given it is in the city limits, I think the only thing we'll need to confirm is working with the city to make sure we are within their codes in terms of what we're digging. But we could create ultimately, besides providing soil for the landfill, we could create water features at this site that would then allow a series of water-based activities that would be beneficial in that area.
Like what?
Well, you could learn to sail without wave action. You could do stand-up paddle boarding. You could fish. We could stock it. So there's options. Just kayaking, canoeing.
We got those ponds now, but nobody's allowed to fish there or sail
the-
there or
the-
waterboard there or anything.
Yeah.
Not waterboard.
Yeah, waterboard. You can waterboard there. Like our borrow pit. We view that an active site. While it would be while each one individually was being dug out, we wouldn't allow access. But once it's complete and stabilized, a key part when you're digging is you would want to have slopes and maybe a bench such that if somebody fell out near the water, they could stand or at least reasonably stand after some swimming. So there would be thought in terms of how it would be dug out for recreational purposes versus pure material where, with the borrow pit, we also pumped it down so we could dig even deeper. So in some cases, it's probably 60 feet deep now, if not deeper.
Right
Steve,
now,
you
60
talk-
feet.
Some areas.
Steve, you talk about selling West Metro. I remember the people coming to hearings and wanted us to buy that. So you're going to be, it was stressed then that folks on the west side wanted a park. What about all that? I mean, they wanted a park like the east side had.
Sure.
At Winter Place. And I know we operated Winter Place for 20 or 30 years without water and sewer.
Right.
So you don't have to have water and sewer to operate a park. You don't have to.
Yeah,
mean,
I wasn't.
You're limited to some of the things you can do there, of
Right.
course, but you don't have to have water and sewer. So I'm wondering how the folks on the west side are gonna take it, knowing that possibility that the land that was bought, for them to have a park in is gonna disappear.
Yeah, it's not doing them any good now. I mean, it's being farmed, and I can tell you, I wasn't around, obviously, for when that happened, but I've not heard from any of those folks. Our park superintendent's been in his position 12 years, has not heard a public demand or outcry for that. So those people may be out there. We've not heard from them. When we went through our land preservation plan, which, had public input and recreation councils, we've just not heard that desire. And the needs have changed. I know, again, this is before my time, but in talking about building soccer fields and various things that I think originally was planned out there, and potentially ball fields, we built the ball fields at Parker. And soccer, that landscape has changed so dramatically in the last 5 years with fields going in Pittsville and down in Fruitland. And I don't know that we could fill on a local level more soccer fields. So I think those things have changed over time, and I've just not heard from those folks that there's that
I don't
need.
live on that side of town. Maybe the councilman from that side of the town.
We'll probably hear if this, if people hear about it.
Could be, yeah. But I'll give you, like Cedar Hill, I know that's much further out, but we've got soccer field, ball field, and even there, those fields are not being highly utilized. So public needs, I think, change over time.
Well, about 2 years ago, I went to Hershey Park, and that's a small area, and they have tournaments there all the time, and the tournament we went to, soccer tournament, had 850 teams.
Yeah.
So it can be done, you just have to market it right.
Steve, do you know what the cost of that property is now, what the value of that property is now? Just curious.
I don't
And
know,
it's-
the
yeah.
appraisal value, I don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I remember what we paid for it, but do you think it's maintained its value, Mark? I
Yeah.
mean, Matt?
Yeah, it's $7,000 to $8,000 an acre right now.
Yeah, I think,
We paid $500,000 for it.
Yeah, it's going up.
I think,
So
I
they're
think,
getting- Yeah, so, yeah.
I think that's a very excellent option. That gives the county a very excellent option to be able to transfer the open space requirements. How sure are you that that can be done?
It's not a guarantee. It's a 12-month process. There'd be a clearinghouse review and an application process. But in talking with them and explaining the Conley Mill property and the West Metro Core property, it meets those three basic criteria. So they said they would entertain that conversion. It's not a guarantee, but I think we can make a very strong case about the recreational value in pairing it with the asset that we have at Parker and its location.
It'd be nice to be relieved of that restriction. Seriously, it'd be very nice to be relieved of that restriction, to
Well-
give us more options for that property if necessary.
Well, the restriction would be transferred to
That's what I
Conley.
mean.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it'd
but
be
it
nice
would
to
be,
be relieved of that restriction
Correct.
on that particular
Yes.
piece of property,
Yes.
because we know what we could do with it if we wanted to.
yeah, and we'd have the option there to develop it or sell it or whatever the council,
So if you transferred the restrictions,
yes.
would you be able to mine it?
If we transferred the restrictions, I don't know the answer to that question.
We could also, I would also think we could subdivide, no, it's a great question. I would think the two aspects of that is, one, we're developing water features for public use. So from that angle, that's the angle I would push. Otherwise, we could subdivide the actual ponds out, and what we put the restrictions on would be the rest of the property.
So in the mining process, you said you'd have to get permits.
We
get mining
we have to
permits.
put together it's a 3-page packet. I can send it to you, but the
Well, I don't
county,
need it.
yeah,
They're the ones.
the county is exempt. Whenever we've expanded our current borrow pit by the landfill, we've had to fill it out just showing the new boundary. And it's,
You're talking about a new mining process here, Weston, and you're also mining somewhere in the vicinity or over top the Paleo Channel. You're in the vicinity of it. I mean,
we're in the vicinity, yes.
I think
Yeah.
before we even pursued this any further, and I know we're not voting on anything tonight, but I think it would be good to know that if we can get mining permits before you go down that road.
Sure, well, our Deputy Director of Public Works spoke with our mining contact, and they said it's simple. The only question is, where it's in the municipality, are there any municipal laws or codes we need to contend with?
But I would say that
So-
the mining division of it's going to have to try to probably deal with the Department of Environment due to the fact that where it's at. Right?
Yeah, they're
I mean, I
one
just
and the
think
same,
I
but
think
yes.
that would be good to have to know that if we can use it
Sure.
for what we want it for before we apply it.
Sure. No, well, I can work on confirmation on
Did
that.
I not hear you correctly saying we only had 100 acres in West Side, though? And we're talking about 240 acres, so we're not talking about mining the whole property, we're only talking about mining 100
Yeah,
acres.
there's other
So
uses, but
just a very limited, or not a very limited, but a limited portion of it would be
sure.
possible for excavation. But I'm not even sure that we decided that that was the avenue that we were going to take with this piece of property.
It's the first time I've heard
We're
this.
exploring options here.
Oh, we're exploring options.
Yes.
I see, so we're comparing the West Side property to this piece of property, when we should probably just be addressing this piece of property in itself, rather than looking at the West Side as some type of alternative option to accept this property. We have other pieces of property that we could possibly do this with, for instance, Pirates Wharf. And we could possibly take that property and swap it for this piece of property if we wanted to go in that direction. There are lots of different options that we could go with.
But you're saying there's lots of different open space properties?
There are a number of different open space
Well,
models.
Pirates Wharf already is
If-
restricted by open space, so we couldn't swap that out with existing open space.
No,
No, with Conley Mill.
With Conley Mill.
Conley Mill.
He's saying you
I
have different
see.
properties with open
Take
space. that-
different
Yeah.
properties with open space, for
Yeah.
instance, Pirates Wharf.
Yeah.
If we decided to go that way. If we explore all the options, we'll be another 5 or 6 years before we'll get this done, I'm sure.
Question.
Are you saying kind of like just to prove it and then figure out which?
No, I didn't say that, Joe. Absolutely not.
Yes.
Don't put me in
How
that position.
how
We're
difficult
talking about
would-
100 acres, though, so.
How difficult would it be for you to get this assurance on the mining options?
I can probably get it tomorrow. The gentleman who manages this was spoken to today, and they just said, again, the county's exempt. The only thing is the municipal laws. So I can confirm that, but I'm positive that there would be recreational opportunities for those sites, even if we couldn't dig it, is I think what Councilman Hall is going with.
Had you said before that it was cost prohibitive to try to establish this as a mining location just simply because of the number of trucks and land moving machines that we'd have to purchase or rent or whatever?
It would be cost prohibitive to buy soil from elsewhere. Councilman Joe Holloway is correct that we're not set up. I mean, we have the excavators, we have the long stick excavator to get 40 feet down from wherever it is. But we don't have the solid waste does not have the dump trucks yet to carry it. Most of our dump trucks are off-road.
Right.
They go from the borrow pit to the landfill. They can carry 50-plus tons, whereas you usually want to stay under 20, with a dump truck.
Can you
But
give
they-
us a cost benefit of what it would be to establish this process as far as if we were to pursue
Sure.
using that dirt for the landfill?
Sure.
Give us that as
Yeah.
well as what the mining permission, yes.
Well, to piggyback off what John is saying, there's, the long-term, plan for the landfill. We obviously, that we're all focused on that. But, how long is the landfill, we need dirt for the landfill for years and years to come. And so, what would be the capability there? What would be the possibility? What would be the equipment needed? I think that would be interesting to see. And what would be the permits? I mean, I think that we need more beyond just word of assurance. I mean, I think when we're talking,
Sure.
Especially, I think part of this is above the paleo channel. I mean, how far can we dig down without, I know nothing about hydrology or soils. How far can you dig down and excavate before you get too close to the paleo channel? That
Sure.
sort of stuff. I think
Sure.
if you're going to pursue that angle, which may be a reasonable angle, if, we need to extend the life of the landfill, and that may be an option, but it would be a cost benefit. We need to know all that. I don't think we're in any rush here. My surprise to see this, speaking of rush and timing and all that, we were told we have to get this done December 31st. They're going with another offer. we didn't do it by December 31st, and all of a sudden we're back here. So, you know, what, I mean, you know, part of my, you know, when I asked at the beginning, what happened with that? I thought that this was, we were, you know, we
The-
forfeited our chance to get this. so, but
The
all of a
news
sudden
of
we're back.
contamination,
Yeah.
I think, chased everybody away.
All right, so we have time then to really to study this and make sure that we have our ducks in a row before we rush to accept this.
Correct, yeah, we don't want to rush anything.
Yeah.
And I
Well, I
hear you. I think we can pull this information together in a short time frame.
I have
think
another question. Is this the only objection then to this property? Or when they bring it back again, or when it comes up again, and they say, okay, we can mine this much, they're gonna say, well, gee, I don't like the railroad tracks next to it, let's move the railroad tracks? Or do you have another
I'll find the
objection?
railroad tracks.
I say, I remember, you know, a hearing where I was chastised for agreeing to something and then coming back later and saying, well, gee, maybe this isn't such a good idea.
This is much objections as it is questions. I mean, I think council has
You know,
a lot of
is this a consideration for this property, and is this why we should be considering it?
I think we've narrowed it down. It's a good question, John. It's a good point. We've narrowed it down to two primary issues. One is how viable your option is, and second one is how viable your option is, right? And if you guys really think that it's a positive and it's feasible, I think that we have every reason to look at very seriously moving forward.
Moving forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, the recreation possibility doesn't excite me that much for this property. The possibility of the landfill sort of issue could, but I do think there's a lot of environmental questions there that I do think would need some time to look at, because, you know, and we could probably talk about this further, because I know there's certain issues, but, yeah, I mean, that to me, but I know that to me is what I think the real promise would be here. But you know, this idea that is coming back before us after we were, you know, frankly being pressured into getting it in a certain time frame, I think causes a little bit of heartburn with some people.
Then I have a question for you, Mr. Coleman.
Okay.
If the recreation portion doesn't excite you for this piece of property, do the recreation portions for West Side, which has not been developed, or Pirates Wharf excite you? And should we get rid of those properties or not find another use for those properties?
Well, if we have them, and I appreciate that the executive looking at the Pirates Wharf situation down there, I think it's good if we have property to look for the recreation possibilities, and I think that's a good thing. I'm glad we're doing that, but the idea that we're acquiring more land to get recreation possibilities when we're not putting recreation on the land we have seems a little bit silly to me.
So we should
that's-
evaluate the other properties then?
I mean,
Suggesting we should do that?
If we're never going to use them, then yeah. I mean, that, if they're not going to be used, then.
And
yeah.
we are looking,
Yeah.
we're still looking at that, because there's several.
appreciate it.
And there's someone, right on 50,
Yeah.
near Winter Place, that are large wooded tracks. They have a creek running either through or along them, but it's not being used. So if we can somehow find, and in this case, I guess my solid waste, you know, putting that behind me, taking what we're viewing as generally unused, unusable, open space, public, you know, meant to be for the public, and transferring it to a property that we think has more potential, that is what we could do with the sites that are restricted by this state POS money. We could find a park site elsewhere that we think would be a better benefit to the citizens, and go through the 12-month process to then take it off property we're not using, putting it to property that we do think can be used. That's only with the properties that have this restriction. In any other case, let's sell it if we're not using it, or we have no long-term use, no planned use.
So then we get back.
Let me get Larry. He's been trying to get a word in.
Well, unlike my colleague, the recreation possibilities do excite me. Anything that improves the quality of life for our citizens, it excites me. But we're talking about the water sports, and then we're talking about the mining. That's going to be a long-term project, isn't it? So then you won't be able to do the water sports.
Not in your lifetime.
That's what I'm thinking. Not my life. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it's going to be more.
Guess I won't be paddle boarding.
And you know, I owe you all a cost-benefit analysis on this. And it's going to be more economical for us to use our off-road dump trucks pulling from the borrow pits that are near our sites, both the current one that with the small pots property we can expand, and, you know, just potential borrow pits. But when we look at that, we're not gonna have, I can tell you right now, we're not gonna have enough soil to cover maybe not even the current landfill and what we plan to expand. We need to make sure we have long-term sources. Now, if we can find another site near the landfill that we can use off-road dump trucks, that's still gonna be the most economic, benefit. We're gonna have dump trucks coming from Connolly Mill to the site. But again, I view this as a two benefit project. We're
And if you use
creating
this
water features as
mining,
well.
you're going to have to buy more equipment to transport it.
Reprioritize equipment. We would need more dump trucks and
And
people to.
Then when I asked the plan about the water sports, somebody thought that was funny. It's not funny, it's gonna last forever. Which I agree, we do need that soil to cap the landfill, but I wanna see a plan, I really do. And another question that I had about the transfer, can we do it, if the option's available, acre for acre? Instead of losing 135 acres?
I believe you
follow what
can,
I'm saying?
in part, I don't know what you'd gain by that.
Well,
But I think you can.
If you put a lot more restrictions on 235 acres, and
Or we could take,
Yeah.
say, like a
additional
180
135.
acre parcel that's forested on the east side that has program open space money. We could try to do multiple properties on this. But again, it goes through a review process, and the more favorable you make the okay, for 100 acres, we're getting 235 acres of public space. That's gonna help sell it. Yeah, and maybe we cut out the ponds, so then, that's
I'd
not even
rather see
a
you
question
do
at all.
Acre for acre, so you don't lose 135 acres. So, and getting back to your first statement about the high levels of lead, what happened to those high levels of lead?
So what the state viewed and the report, the limited phase 2 said, is what they took was a turbid sample. So that's just fancy speak for mixed up. And it wasn't representative of what's actually there. The groundwater samples they took are far better than grabbing from just digging out of a puddle, I guess is the comparison. There were 3 spots they tested, and one of which, the most eastern test came back 700 whatever milligrams per liter, or whatever the threshold is.
So is there still high levels of lead in those 3 areas?
They view that was, if you mix it up, that was bad,
Diluted.
but the groundwater is not, the soils are not, so it's not a widespread, dangerous area. It was how the sample was taken, so they questioned that altogether.
And I like the idea of doing something with this property, but in December, when we walked away from it, I didn't know you were going to bring it back to us, but
I didn't know I was going to bring it back.
I want to make sure that we're not stuck with spending tax dollars on cleaning up this property.
Sure, and that's why who I sent it to, if you look at that letter, their land preservation program, but they handle brownfields. They are the reclamation folks. They told me when I had originally sent them, they said if the sampling isn't good enough, they will come out and do samples as well if they feel that there's a contaminated site. And the phone call I got and the letter followed it up was basically, good news for you, bad news for us, we don't have a project. The site's fine.
Weston, this
Yes.
letter's pretty open, if you read it. They basically, as always, this letter should not be construed as a waiver
Sure.
or limitation of the department's right to take enforcement or other action with respect to activities not addressed herein or unknown by the department at this time, newly discovered contamination or exhibition of existing contamination. So, it leaves things pretty open, and I understand, I'm talking to Steve this weekend, by the way, thanks a lot, I enjoyed the conversation. Most of this stuff, and where I wanted to head with this, most of this contamination, Steve said, is coming from the four-wheelers and the dirt bikes and that kind of stuff. What are we gonna do to secure this property, and how much is that gonna cost? That's
Well,
and I know
yeah.
you don't have an answer for that right now, because you've not studied that, but that's something we need to know about too, because that's a 200 and some acre site that's being actively used daily, probably, right, Steve?
Well, I was out there over Labor Day weekend, I guess, Sunday.
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday. And I caught a couple people back there with their
pickup trucks and their trailers, and one of them had 2 4-wheelers on it, and they were all back there gunning around. And wherever they could find some water, they all just loved to drive through the water. And that's why, according to some of the people out at Heinz, is why in those mud puddles where they took the samples last year, that they got the high lead, that comes from the exhaust and brakes. And so I kicked these guys off. I told them I took down their tag numbers, their names, and I said, if you're out here again, I'm going to file an actual criminal trespass action against you. And they told me, well, some lawyer from New York who represents the people who own this said it was okay. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm not from New York, and I represent the people that own this property, and there isn't a damn living soul on the face of this earth that has permission to come out here and do what you guys are doing. Now get out of here and don't come back.
See, that's a concern, that's something we're gonna have to face if we accept this property.
And,
That's a big-
yeah,
Joe.
agreed, and just like any of our parks, there will need to be some mechanism in terms of how do we keep them safe, how do we keep illicit activities from happening at night and after hours. So, no, you're correct.
Joe, I think all the no trespassing signs that my people have put up over the years get ripped down. We even had a gate at one point that was ripped down. But a no trespassing sign put up there that says, County Council, or Wicomico County, no trespassing, that carries a little bit more weight than just a plain old no trespassing sign. I think.
I think also, once, if the sheriff's department were to make any type of trespassing arrest, sooner or later word gets around. I mean, I'm familiar with places where, where there was limited parking at school, where people might park somewhere, and as soon as you found out, don't park there because you get towed, nobody ever parked there again, and it was always vacant. And I think we might hopefully see the same results.
Wouldn't
Just another something to.
wouldn't the Natural Resources Police have jurisdiction to patrol that area?
Well, the city of Salisbury Police Department has jurisdiction, and for a while, it took me a long time to convince them that it was in the city.
Right.
Finally, when I did, then they would go out there, but you had to really lean on them to get them to go out there because they had to drive all the way around to get there. So we never really got a whole lot of cooperation out of the police department until recently, and daggone it, the gal who was in charge just retired.
Let me, I do want to wrap this up. John, I know you had a comment you wanted to make.
I have another question. The value of this property has been valued at over $1 million. And I'd like, Mr. Mark Holloway, Matt Holloway, I'm sorry. Thanks. It's kind of, you do want to wrap it up. This property is suitable for farming, isn't it?
Not really. There's, a lot of it is forested, a lot of it has been excavated. There's not very much level land out there, so it wouldn't be very highly suitable for farming.
Okay, so it's not a highly desirable farm property. Recreation's would be the primary use.
Mark? Yeah.
Is this free and clear donation, or are we being asked to, I mean, is there some other financial, was back taxes being waived or something? I mean, was that last year or something?
That was last year. I think the request this year was to cover the engineering study they paid for, that then found it was clean.
How much is that?
But, what was the ask, 35?
35, I think.
35,000. That would be included as part of the cost benefit, because that would be an expense that solid waste could cover to pay for what would probably amount to be over $10 million worth of soil minus trucking costs.
Anyone else?
Weston, just real quick, when they excavated it previously, when they used that soil to build the bypass,
Yes,
they set up a conveyor belt that ran down the railroad tracks.
for a while.
Yeah, and I don't know why, I don't know if that failed, if it was just a bad idea. I didn't know if that's something we could look at again
Sure.
to get the soil closer to Naylor Mill Road and shorten that span of trucking, but
My recollection is that the equipment they were using for their conveyor malfunctioned a lot.
okay,
It became sort of unreliable and
okay.
was slowing down their progress, and they just finally abandoned it and went back to
And just
trucks.
trucked it, okay.
I mean, we could look at if getting a truck to a location off the rail line made more sense
Right,
than
right.
coming all the way down Connolly Mill and down the path. Yeah, that could,
It's 25 years ago, they might have better conveyor belt
Sure.
technology now. So.
Sure.
Would,
Railroad track up over there by the landfill, you could run a train.
sure.
would 2 weeks suffice for you, gentlemen? Do you
I-
need 4 weeks?
I think honestly, to do a proper cost benefit, 4 weeks would be
Okay.
safe. If we can do it faster, we'll let you know.
Yeah,
but
we
I
can
think,
always-
I think
we can
4
always try to
weeks,
accommodate.
to pull that.
Can I just
Yes.
make one comment that, of course, I represent the group, and when the county turned it down last December, then after a pause to collect our breath, then beginning this, late this spring, we began contacting 501c3 outfits to see with any of them, and I'm talking about the kind that have some sort of a community purpose relationship, and objective and purpose, to see if they would be interested in this property, either for their own use or simply to take the property and then do with it as they wish, sell it and take the money and use that money for purposes of their own programs. And we've talked to a number of them. Several of them were very interested, but for one reason or another didn't feel that they were in a position to do it, or that didn't really, their mission wasn't quite, just didn't fit within their mission statement. But there are still 2 out there that are very interested in it. And my problem is, or not my problem, my assignment basically is to donate this property to either the county, which was the original preference, or to one of the 501c3s who step forward and say, yes, we're in a position and we would like the property. So I just ask that you move as expeditiously as you can, because people have asked me, why don't you just sell it? There's several factors that maybe you all ought to be aware of. Number one, when this property was purchased in the early 1980s, it was purchased at the behest of SWED. SWED is the one who brought this whole thing about. And Bob Kiley was then the executive director of SWED. And he felt there was going to be a real need for an additional industrial park, because at that point in time, Northwood Industrial Park was going bananas. I mean, they were selling lots, factories were coming in, plants were coming in, and there was this projection that in a very short period of time, meaning 2 to 5 years, there wouldn't be any more sites in Northwood, and we would be without any ability to provide sites to industries wanting to locate here on the railroad. Charles Truitt was then the president of WBOC and Peninsula Press and all the other Sun Paper businesses that were located here. And Charlie Truitt and Bob Kiley went about trying to find a piece of land that would serve as a future industrial park. There was only 3 criteria. One, it had to be in Wicomico County. 2, it had to be on the railroad, because at that time, the idea that railroads were instrumental in commercial, or rather industrial development, was paramount. And then number 3, it had to be able to be purchased at a price that would enable it to be developed as an industrial park. And after looking at a whole bunch of properties all the way from Somerset County to Sussex County, they found this one, because this particular farm only had an old farmhouse on it, which was not in great condition at all, and a 3-sided equipment shed in the back of it. That was all the improvements. Everything else, it was farmland, and it had been that way apparently for decades. All the other properties that would otherwise have qualified had too many improvements on them, whether they were silos, barns, houses, you name it, so that when the purchase price then would have, for purposes of an industrial park, raised the land cost up much too high. It just didn't work. But this property worked. So they went about soliciting from citizens of this area the monies to buy it. It cost $550,000 in 1982 or thereabouts. I forget the exact date. And so about 15 or 16 people, some very names that you're all familiar with, Purdue, Hess, Henson, and 13 or 14 others, in various amounts, put the money up to buy the property because nobody wanted a mortgage on it. They were buying it to land bank it. That was the purpose. the people who put the money up were not land developers or builders or anything. I think there was one realtor on it, Bob Warfield from Ocean City, who just a couple of years ago just died. Well, what's happened? No, a couple of things happened. The demand for industrial property collapsed. The demand for industrial property on the railroad completely collapsed. And then we went through a couple of mini recessions along the way. Finally, and I forget the year, but it would have been somewhere around 1990, the property was rezoned, not at our request, but at the request of a contract buyer of the property who wanted to put a residential subdivision out there. And he got an option from us for it. And he got the zoning changed to residential. And then his finance or business partner from Germany tanked. And so he didn't go through with the deal. So it's just sat there ever since. Now, we've tried to sell it. For a number of years, we've tried to sell it, but there's been no market for it. Not that big of a piece of property. And it doesn't really lend itself to being subdivided particularly. And then, of course, in the last 10 years, in the last 8 years in particular, there's been no market really for large pieces of residential property for a developer. Who's going to build we have an approved preliminary subdivision plan for that property for about 400 houses. And these two pits, we call them, were actually designed and dug as stormwater management facilities. That's what they're there. They were not there as borrow pits. I mean, that's what came out of them, but they were designed specifically to handle the stormwater from this proposed residential development that, of course, has never taken place. So people say, well, why don't you just turn around and sell it? Well, for a number of years we did. We listed it 2 or 3 times with different realtors. Never got a single offer for it because I guess there was nobody locally that felt that they wanted to pay the kind of money the property was worth if they're going to have to sit on it for a long time, and there was no market. And there's no water and sewer. There's no water and sewer. And so it's just languished. So finally, the people who originally put the money up, half of them are dead. And so their interest in this partnership is now owned by their widows, children, and in some instances, grandchildren. And I have people I have to communicate with that are located all the way from Salisbury to Santa Fe and the West Coast to boot, and Louisiana. So there's about 25 of them now, 25 or 30, I forget the exact number. But it's become a real pain in the neck, frankly, to administer. And of course, these people are forking up the money every year for the taxes, the insurance, and various expenses, professional fees, maintenance. I say maintenance, that's trying to keep people out. So they made the decision about 2 years ago. Look, we didn't buy this property to make a bunch of money with. Let's have it appraised. Let's give it to the county or the city or the town of Elmont. And I was instructed to write all 3 bodies and offer it as a gift. Because, yes, it could be sold tomorrow, but it would be no buyer or no developer is going to buy this except at a really steep discount. So if we're going to sell it to somebody who's going to, in effect, get it as a steal, and then be able, by hanging on to it for maybe, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and make a humongous profit out of it, more power to him. But my group would rather make the gift, rather than to some developer that they don't even know. They'd rather make the gift to a public or public-related type, public interest type organization, because that was the whole purpose of buying the property in the first place. So that's kind of a real rough sketch background of where this is. My people, and the papers always say like I'm one of the owners. Well, I am in an indirect way. I think I own between 1.5% and 2% of this deal. So factor that in as you will. But it actually makes more sense economically to my group to donate this property to the county or to a 501c3 and take a gift tax deduction at its true value, which $1,000,001, the state says it's worth $1,000,007. Well, I'll happily sell it to the state for $1,000,007. I would happily sell it to the county for $1,000,001, which is what it's appraised for. But my instructions are my group wants to donate it to the county. And that's where we are.
So we were turned down from Delmar and Salisbury also?
Delmar never responded at all. The city of Salisbury never responded at all. I wrote letters to all three groups. Wicomico County is the only body that responded, showing any interest at all. And then after this whole thing was explained, well, that's why we're here, because the county was very interested once they got their arms around it.
Well, we appreciate your perspective on that. That's beneficial for us. What you gentlemen are going to do is about a 4-week period. If you wrap it up early, you'll let us know?
Correct.
Back to us? Okay. All right, Mr. Smethurst, thank you for taking time to be here. Gentlemen, same.
Thank you.
Any other council comments? No. Thank you,
All right,
gentlemen.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned.